My name is Shantell Martin, and I'm the host of What's the Point? This is a conversation series dedicated to exploring why artists create art and the forces that influence us. Join me as I sit down with artists and friends to talk about their reasons for doing what they do and why they continue to create.
For me, the point of art is creating your own language.
A lot of times when I shoot, I think of how's this going to look in 10 years?
I don't really think about the individual colors as much as I think about how they play off of each other.
Oh, the point is the journey.
And I start to get a sense of what the painting is going to be like.
Because the point of art could simply be just to make it.
I'm very happy to introduce today's guest, Keith Mayerson. He's an extremely busy guy, so it's taken a while to get him in here. Keith has had his art professionally exhibited in museums and galleries since 1993, and he's inspired by symbols of American history and pop culture. His long-running non-linear narrative, My American Dream, has been presented in separate catalogues and chapters, and he has collaborated with the writer Dennis Cooper to create the graphic novel Horror Hospital Unplugged. His work is thought-provoking and nuanced, and I'm very happy to welcome him to What's the Point? Welcome, Keith. So, we did that thing where we started talking before we were recording, and then we spoke about all these things. Mm-hmm. But what were you just saying?
So, my new news is that I'm going to have a show at the Aspen Art Museum in March of 2026. So I'm super happy about that. I grew up in Colorado, and it's my hometown. I was born in Cincinnati, but moved out 2 weeks old, and I just love it there. And Aspen was like Xanadu for us as kids. Oh my gosh, obviously John Denver lived there. Hunter S. Thompson. My guilty pleasure was him being sort of a hero when I was in high school. And even though Aspen was 4 hours away from Denver, so it was hard to get up there to ski all the time, when I did have the opportunity, it was incredible. And I always loved it. I had fantasies about it. Of course, it's changed since then. It's become much more of a less funky and much more of a global, international, like billionaires playground.
I've never been.
Yeah. Oh my God, it's so beautiful. I was taking pictures of Monument Valley for my show at Karma in LA from a couple of years ago.
What's Monument Valley?
Oh, it's like where the John Ford movies are all filmed, with those incredible giant canyons and Plymouths and rocks, and it's still owned by the Navajo Nation. And so the integrity is still there. It looks exactly like the old John Ford movies. It's incredible. I always wanted to paint it. Anyway, I had a lovely time there painting, or taking a zillion photographs to find the best one for the painting. But then my friend Chase Hall was having an opening at the Aspen Art Museum, and I was en route to visit my folks who still live in downtown Denver. So I took a side road to Aspen to say hey to Chase and congratulate him. It was an Art Crush week, and I met one of the curators, Simone Krug, who is actually an MA graduate from USC, who I knew a little bit, but we got on, and then one thing led to another. And last week, they asked me to have a show in March. And so my dad's 92 and has the beginnings of, he's forgetting a lot.
Yeah.
That's what I want. And my mom's 87. And what's great about this is, personally, my family will be able to enjoy it and come up there, and we could have like a holiday while my dad can still remember everything. And my mom will still, be like 100% in spirits, and so it'll be a real reunion. And the show's going to be all my work since 2000 has been called My American Dream, about the America that I love. And my husband, Andrew Madrid, who is Latino and part indigenous, about the America that we still love to go home. Yeah. And the civil rights leaders and the great landscapes, and the family that's our nuclear family, our internal family, but also our family of heroes and icons that helped to create the America that I hope we could still believe in. I started it in 2000, really when 9/11 happened. Instead of doing Bush's bad paintings, I wanted to do things that made me feel hopeful in my old age, and that gave me aspirational spirit. And so this is an extension. Each of my shows is another chapter of it. And this show is going to be called My American Dream, Rocky Mountain High. Drugs are bad, art is good. But this will be the high of the experience of growing up in Denver, where the air is a little cleaner. now, and in the mountains. It's so beautiful. And we have a gay governor and nice diversity, politics, and joyful spirits everywhere. So it'll be a real celebration of that.
Huge congratulations.
Thank you.
And I love that it's going to be a celebration. It's going to be a reunion. It's going to be, a solo exhibit. It's going to be, have so many layers to it there.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing. So I'm just so looking forward to working on it. And I just came from the Whitney. I have a piece up there, my 9/11 painting, and we just did a talk with my friend Jane Dixon. I'm on the same wall with her and Salman Tour. So very proud for this, and a show called Shifting Landscapes, which will be up through January 2026. And it's a curated show of their permanent holdings, but it's really about different ideas of landscapes in America. And different ideas of what landscapes could mean, talking about all the different wonderful peoples that we have in our United States, and different ideas of landscapes that aren't Deus Ex Machina, but more about the real celebration of diversity and human rights and our planet, and especially America. And I'm in the New York room, which 9/11 is sort of at its core, but also the AIDS crisis, the East Village 80s. And so, oh my gosh, I got into this because I loved the East Village 80s scene. I was a little too young to participate. I was in college at the time. But this book came out called Art After Midnight, the East Village Scene. And it had Kenny Scharf on the cover, Sung Kwang Chi on the back of the whole East Village gang of Ann Magnuson and Joey Arias and McDermott McGuff and Keith Haring. In this room of the New York cityscapes is Basquiat, who is like my hero, one of the reasons I wanted to be an artist, and Keith Haring and Sung Kwang Chi and Peter Hujar and Martin Wong's Kissing Fireman painting, and Jane, as I mentioned, who was part of that scene, and a bunch of other people. That it's great. So I feel like really I could pinch myself because the spirits in that room were the thing that got me going. And to be on those walls with those people, oh my goodness.
So in a way, do you feel like you're living your dream, the American dream?
I'm trying. Yeah. I'm trying my best.
Yeah.
I think, being an artist, the cool thing is it's really about ideation, right? Like we think of ideas of artworks that we want to create, and then we create them. And then sometimes, if we're fortunate enough, we get to have installations that we thought of. And I think hopefully it's manifest of our lives where we could hopefully, create our lives for us that we want to live, and realize, thinking outside the box, that you don't have to stick around your cul-de-sac suburbia or wherever it is that you grew up in, even though that's wonderful too, but that you could achieve your dream and live the life that you want to live to the fullest. I'm very privileged and proud to be a full tenured professor at USC after many years of teaching in New York for 25 years. I was the head comics teacher at SVA. I started out as a cartoonist, and I was always a comics kid in school since kindergarten on. I was publishing my works, and it wasn't until after college I decided that maybe it would be a good idea to be a fine artist. I wanted to be a New Yorker cartoonist. And I studied playwriting in college, and I studied fine art and semiotics. But I knew I didn't have it in me to be a semiotician.
A semiotician?
Yeah, talking about like signs and symbols and French theory and post-Marxist colonialist politics. But I love bringing up ideas aesthetically, which is what cartoons were always about for me. And my first art job I worked at in New York after graduating from Brown. I worked at an art magazine called Contemporanea, which quickly led to working the front desk at Robert Miller Gallery, which was a great gallery on 57th Street in the Fuller Building, the directors of which were Chime and Reed, who had their own great gallery after this. And it was really important for showing women. Alice Neal showed there, Yayoi Kusama showed there, Joan Mitchell. But also my heroes who had just passed away, Mapplethorpe and Basquiat, showed there. And anyway, I was dropping off 10 cartoons a week to the New Yorker, as you will, and I was late for a panel with a guy named Lee Lorenz, who was then the comics director for the New Yorker. And I came up to him, I said, Mr. Lorenz, it's our silver anniversary. I just dropped off my 100th cartoon to you. And he said, well, I don't know if you saw Roz Chaz and George Booth here on the panel, but George, who did like the cranky old people and the dogs and cats cartoons for the New Yorker, was art directed after his comics, was dropping off 10 cartoons a week for 10 years before he got his first one in. So I'm not saying it takes 10 years of that many comics, but it helps. And I was like, oh my gosh, I walked out of there with a heavy head and said, maybe if art is about bringing up ideas aesthetically like comics are, I love the rendering process. I wasn't so interested in making people laugh, but maybe being a fine artist would just be as hard or as easy as being a cartoonist. And so I switched to this direction then and there, really, and started making work to go to grad school. I went to grad school at UC Irvine in the early 90s. A lot of the people in the wonderful Thelma Golden and Friends Gender and Diversity Whitney Biannual were my teachers. So Pat Ward-Williams and Larry Pittman and Danny Martinez and all those great folks. I met my boyfriend then, who is now my husband. And Shantell, I have to tell you, my parents reminded me today that it's Andrew and I's 33rd anniversary today.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. We got married the first chance we could, the first Sunday you could in California. Yeah, we've been together 33 years, and he's my age. He took a couple of years off, but he was an undergrad at UC Irvine. And this marks the 33rd anniversary where he brought me food to my install of my first graduate show in their cool gallery there. And we've been together ever since. So yeah, I was in New York for 25 years with him and teaching all along at SVA Comics and Fine Art everywhere else and exhibiting all those many years that I taught. And then finally, Andrew wanted to be more around his family. He grew up around Mission Viejo and Long Beach in California. And he said, Keith, we've done this. Now it's my turn. We get to go to California and apply for jobs. So USC just had their notorious walkout. I had applied to UCSD and I got in, but we couldn't quite get our ducks in a row. And so I had to say no. And then when they had their walkout at USC, Andrew said, you better walk in. And so I applied and they recruited me. And here I am 8 years later in wonderful, sunny, fiery California. We live in Riverside in the middle of nowhere near Lake Elsinore. And so after being in the center of everything in New York, we're now in the middle of nowhere with 2 acres flat. So you can do anything you want. We have 3 big dogs, 3 cats, 4 peacocks, and my parrot, who's one of my best friends, Picasso. She's amazing, and she's always at my side when I'm making my work. And so I'm painting all the time when I'm not teaching and doing art world stuff in between. So this has been my life. And yeah, I guess I'm living my American dream.
Yeah, that's the American dream right there.
There we go.
Lots to unpack there. That was a lot of information and names. And I just want to ask a couple of questions. When you say you were dropping cartoons off at the New Yorker, what does that mean, dropping them off? Because at first it sounded like you drop them off and then they choose if they select some or not. But are you voluntarily dropping them off? And,
yeah.
Or you have all these cartoonists that just show up and drop drawings off? Is that what was happening?
That's the routine historically at the New Yorker. And it's still like that. I don't know if people physically drop off our portfolio anymore in the age of, internets and emails. But it used to be that all the cartoonists were freelance. And even the famous ones like George Booth would come to the office on a Wednesday morning, drop off their portfolio of sketches that the editor would look over and then approve to be brought up into more full cartoons. And so newbies and neophytes like myself, along with the old guard, would be there. I never saw them. I had to drop off really early before I went to work. But that's the way it happened. And I've actually had students, my SVA students, get into the New Yorker. A few of them, and one's still publishing in the New Yorker. So they're living my dream there. But,
and were those copies that you dropped off?
No, they were original sketches, believe it or not.
Wow. So they're probably sitting on a gold mine of, original sketches from all these cartoonists.
No, well, I would get them back.
Oh,
but
okay.
My gold mine is like in my flat file on the, I think the second drawer after high school and college comics. But maybe one of these days I'll get them out there.
And you said you moved to Colorado just at 2 weeks old. So Cincinnati doesn't get to claim you, or do they claim you?
Well, I'm a Buckeye at heart, and I had some great shows at Cleveland. My last solo show was at Cleveland MoCA, the Museum of Contemporary Art in Cleveland, and it's a great art town, actually. But yeah, no, my parents are from the South. My dad's from New Orleans. My mom's from Belzona, Mississippi, believe it or not. But they got the heck out of there in the 60s when they realized, like, oh my gosh, a lot of their high school people that they knew were racist, and it was the civil rights movement. And they wanted my sister and I to grow up in a better environment. And I'm half Jewish, half Southern Baptist. My dad's the Jewish family, which is interesting in New Orleans. Like the rabbi would come over for Christmas dinner. The family's really good, and I think they're really good people. We know that we have great people all across our United States, and sometimes the leaders are not so great, but they're good people. But I was grateful to grow up in Colorado, where it was really beautiful and sort of a new frontier. Even though I grew up in the suburbs, I would go up every weekend to go to the mountains, to go skiing with my friends and hiking and things like that. And there's a really good music scene there. And so since the 60s, like all the bands would come through. And so I was the president of my high school radio station, KCRK. I had a beautiful big public high school that I went to, Cherry Creek. But I got a lot of my cultural yayas out by going downtown and slam dancing with my friends and then telling my parents I went to a jazz concert or something. But that was really in reading New Musical Express and the Face magazine. I'm sure you're very well acquainted with growing up in the UK. But that was, I realized that there was a way out, culturally speaking.
Yeah, because I imagine, being in Colorado, you spent a lot of time outside as a kid, especially then. So were you drawn to creating as a child? Like where did that spark come from initially?
One of the reasons I love teaching is that I had a fifth grade teacher, Mr. J, Victor Jacobson, who realized that I was a quirky kid, but had good drawing skills. And he was a Doonesbury fan. I was drawing for my school paper even before then, but he recognized my talent and had me do Doonesbury money. It was his first year teaching. So if the kids...
So what's Doonesbury?
It is a great comic strip by G.B. Trudeau, who emerged in the 60s. He was the Yale cartoonist. And it was a baby boomer's political strip, and with really good characters, really good writing. Still going on today. He doesn't draw it. He hasn't drawn it for many years, but it's still very pertinent. He was on to TRUMP way before he ever was running for president. And it really reflected my values. And so anyway, if the kids were all crazy, Mr. J would say, stop. And if they were working at their desk, they would get Doonesbury money. He would have a little auction of like his personal, like Simon and Garfunkel records or something. And so you would give Doonesbury money to get a Simon Garfunkel record. And he had me do the bulletin boards and things like that and really encouraged me. Really, it was one of those great teachers. I think it's helped a lot of us that, finding your agency or finding the student's agency in their art and being able to speak through your work. Which is something that I try to give back every day, forever. I love teaching. My dad's a retired psychoanalyst. My sister is a therapist in the Bay Area. I knew I didn't have me to be a therapist, and obviously being an artist isn't about, or an art teacher being anything touchy-feely like that, but it is about recognizing the voice and helping students help themselves find their own voice in their work and their agency. And so it's something I really believe in, especially now. Oh my gosh.
I love that Mr. J created a focus economy.
Yeah.
If you focus, you can make Doonesbury money and you can exchange those for goods.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of a really nice way of doing it and teaching and inspiring the students to actually work.
Yeah, it really helped. And I've always been, I was uncoordinated as a gay glasses wearing kid. But it was through my art that I was able to, make friends and find my own strengths. Yeah. And, even my giant 4,000 kid high school, I was elected prom king my senior year. I think I was one of the first non-jocks to get that crown.
So what do you think gave you that confidence at that time? Because especially at that time, like for myself, being gay growing up in London, I couldn't really express that till I left, and I grew up in the 80s and 90s, a little bit later. So, what gave you that space to kind of really be confident in yourself at that age?
Truly, it was art and creativity. I wasn't out till college, and even then I was only out to my friends. Being able to publish in the paper, and I started a whole visual narrative program at USC because of this. I really think that art is language and language is power. And to be able to make my art and have it be seen, even if it was just illustrations for the school paper or the comics and so on, just gave me like a feeling of, sort of a Cartesian Instead of I think, therefore I am, I'm making stuff and people are responding to it. And it was reflecting back on my own selfhood and realizing that I had this ability to communicate through pictures and in words I wrote too. But it was really that. And then honestly, the culture in which we grew up. I mean, the Reagan 80s, I tell the kids now, weren't nearly as chaotic as our current time or as potentially horrible. But to counter that, we had the East Village 80s art scene. Art was better than ever. I think it was one of the last great American art movements. We had incredible music. Oh my goodness. And great comics. And a lot of the work was about sticking it to the man, but a celebration also of the communities that were making this work that have been so impactful for all of us. I'm sure you must have been influenced by the East Village 80s and Keith Haring and Basquiat and all those guys.
To be honest, I didn't really know much about it until later on in life.
Oh, okay.
And I think my inspiration came from Japan and kind of more of the improvised music scene. So similar in the sense that it was like music and art, but it was more about artists who work spontaneously and in improvised scenes.
Right.
Especially in the avant-garde scenes where you have blue toe dancers meet circuit benders, meet people who are live coding, meeting people who are live drawing. And so that kind of, that whole space of stream of consciousness, and as you pull that out. And I love that you kind of reference like art as language. You've created this language that you communicate with. And we have your book on the table here, My American Dream, and it's thick. It's a brick.
It's a doorstop, that's for sure.
So there's an expansive language that you've created in there. And with that language, there's a lot of works that you've created. That's a huge legacy in a way. And so with all those works, I wonder, were you documenting the works that you created early on? You've had a lot of kind of institutional success with museums and galleries. And because of that, from the early on ages, were they documenting your work? Do you have images of your work? Can you now see that body and tail of your work over all these years and decades?
Yeah, I do have a website, www.keithmayerson.com, and it has a lot of everything in there, actually in a feed section. And it was really in 9/11 I realized, when I was teaching at SVA, School of Visual Arts, I was the head comics teacher, the cartooning coordinator, and I didn't have to defend myself. I said I'm an avant-garde cartoonist because in my installations, and ultimately I think of myself as an installation artist doing nonlinear narratives where each of the paintings talks to one another like panels in a comic. I really think about the ideas and the language of comics where they're all about juxtapositions, where you have one image next to another image, and the combination of the two, Scott McCloud Understanding Comics calls closure, where the viewer is creating the ultimate content of what it means to have these juxtapositions of words and images. In many ways, I'm an avant-garde cartoonist.
And is the thinking there that because you put these images next to each other, they then therefore become connected, regardless of the content or, kind of the deeper meaning of them?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, in terms of how people are perceiving them in installations, in this book, I call it a wordless novel, which was before graphic novels. People like Franz Mazariel and Cy Lewin would be creating books of woodcuts. Lynn Ward, I'm sorry, woodcuts where it would be one image next to another image for adults, and they would be looking through it and, it would be telling stories without words. And I think of all my shows as being like that, an installation where people are trying to figure out why is Cheech and Chong next to the city of Los Angeles, next to a painting of Skateboarder magazine, and putting it all together in their own mind's eye. So there's a lot of mystery and juxtapositions. And, it's interesting because in the art world, people, of course, know frescoes and murals. I love all the Mexican muralists, altarpieces and frescoes in churches and cathedrals. But when you see a normal art show, people just think of them as like horses in a stable with the images not really relating to one another, but each individual one placed. Whereas I really think of taking the viewer on a journey. And so even if people aren't conscious of what it is they're seeing, they see the disparity of the different images and how they aren't all just the blue dog, on one journey. And they say that there's this weird experience they have of closure, as I call it, where they're putting it together in their mind's eye and realize that they've been taken somewhere, hopefully if it works. And then with each successive show, building on this on each chapter of these shows. Hopefully now it's year 2025. I've really been consciously doing this since 2000 for this body of work. It continues. And really it's a celebration of democracy with a small d, hopefully not an elegy. But I also think of myself as a history painter and painting this history in a way that hopefully has warmth and empathy and sort of transcendence for beyond what a painting in 9/11 might mean, so people feel it and they get sort of this third meaning, which is the thing that kind of draws them in emotionally while they're thinking about what it means, both historically and how it could work allegorically for our moment in time.
Yeah. And I think in that way, you've done your job as an artist by creating the work and, not being too obvious of how the consumer should put those pieces together, but have this subconscious kind of closure, as you call it,
Right.
by pulling those pieces together.
Right.
And speaking of the past, you have been a teacher for many, many years. So, in a way, kind of touching the products and the creators of the future. How do you find teaching? Has that changed over the years?
I love teaching. I have to tell you, I'm a big Charles White fan and Baldessari fan. And, I come from, I'm 58, so I'm kind of old. But I come from that generation where great artists teach, and it's about giving back. Larry Pittman was one of my teachers, as I mentioned, in grad school before he went to UCLA, and I just felt it was part of the legacy of being an artist. Art making is my oxygen mask. That's what I have to put on first. I love that I have my art career and so on. But, and also as a gay person, I feel Andrew and I don't have kids, and in many ways it was like raising kids, intellectually and aesthetically, by teaching. So it's, sometimes we grumble coming out of our studio going like, oh my goodness, I have to go teach today. But then I always leave with a smile on my face. It's so gratifying. And I've had many, many students do great in their careers as fine artists, and many students do amazing things as cartoonists. Nate Powell was one of my kids who illustrated Senator John Lewis's March trilogy, because John Lewis, read a comic when he was a kid called The Montgomery Story that was about Dr. Martin Luther King and the whole civil rights movement, and it really inspired him to join the movement when he was a teenager, and he wants to give back. But my students, the comics kids, have grown up to do like storyboarding for Steven Universe and Adventure Time and different sort of edutaining kind of shows like We Bear Bears about Asian American bears, but they are anthropomorphized animals. But I always think that speaking through that language, you have empathy and compassion for a lot of people and environments, because you're suturing into iconic characters that are very relatable because they're so essentialized of being anthropomorphized animals or simplified drawings. And they truly can make the world a better place, as well as my fine art students too. It has changed, Shantell, I'll tell you, I was at NYU for 13 years, and when 9/11 happened, Andrew and I were living in Soho. We heard the first plane fly overhead. We saw it on the news. I went out to the street in like a Steven Spielberg movie. I looked up and I saw the hole in the building, all the people in it. And my drawing class, freshman drawing class, met at 9 a.m. So I went to school. Everybody was in shock. Nobody knew what to do. And I teach composition via the gag cartoon still. But I was like, guys, I don't feel like drawing comics today. I don't know what to do, but let's go to Washington Square Park and draw this thing, because the artists deal with stuff by drawing it. So we went to Washington Square Park, and the kids got their sketchbooks out just in time for the first tower to fall.
Wow.
And so the adults in the park were screaming and crying. My kids were great and hugging them. And I was like, okay, guys, go home, call your parents, let them know you're okay. But there was as you can imagine, a melancholic malaise amongst my students at that time that was really tough. But I always teach that art is a meditation. When we're making images, they're talismans for us to think about. They all get Harry Potter. So it's like Harry Potter penceives, where you're drawing out thoughts from your brain and putting it on paper or on canvas and not being haunted by them. I had nightmares of all the people falling for 7 years. And finally, to get the nightmares out, instead of painting allegorically, I started painting the papers that my dad saved for me. Yeah, it helped the nightmares go away. And, now in this era, it's similar, where there's sort of this malaise amongst my students. But I'm like, oh my gosh, guys, we have our art. Thankfully, we have our art community of your cohorts. And we have the wonderful, I'm still very much of an optimist, art world where your work circulates. That really is, I always think woke means having empathy and compassion for other people who are and are not like you. that, the art world is certainly not perfect, but it's much better than it has ever been, and much better than many other places in our business world of America. And it's a safe space to make your work where it really is about making things that are meaningful, that you care about, that have integrity, that are important to you. And hopefully we're not Weimar Germany, but as Weimar America, we could reflect about at that era, and all the artwork that was being made at that time is so important. And art inventions that have happened through generations have always been, are oftentimes from young people who don't realize that they're mortal yet and are making stuff outside the box because they really believe in it, and they could really change culture in a trickle-down way with fine art, or in a very even more direct way with comics and illustration and narrative art that goes really to the people, which is, ultimately what it's all about.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting with the idea of art almost as like orbits or silos. And yes, we have the art market and we have the art world, but actually we have art. And at the core of art is that ability to use it as a tool to express, to extract, to deal with hurt, to deal with pain, to deal with anger, to deal with hope, to deal with all those things. And, I always say it's a connection between your head, your heart, and your hand that allows other people to see it. And I think, we forget that sometimes until something really tragic or kind of big happens. And then we really dig into art to kind of evolve through that, to deal with it, to heal from it, to share it. And I think there's such a power with art, and that can be forgotten. And I love kind of hearing that story, especially with the kids in Washington Square Park, just extracting it, getting it out, helping. I think that's so powerful.
Yeah, and some of those students have gone on to great things, and also become gallery dealers and stuff, or work, on either side of the desk doing art. But for me, it's great when the people go back into the art world, and make it a better place. But even if they're just creatively thinking as artists, even if they stop making stuff, if they're creative, for me, that's just so important, because they're, critical thinking, active participants in their own agency and their own culture, and giving back in that way. And I think I remember after 9/11 happened, it was devastating, obviously. But then when the Met reopened, it was sort of cheating because it was a blockbuster show, but it was the Da Vinci drawing show. But there were lines around the block for people to just go and see the Met, see the Da Vinci drawings. When Chelsea reopened, people were sort of staggering back out of the ashes just to see art because they needed it. It was so edifying for them. And as artists, I think we really have a role and responsibility, if not being shaman of our cultures, to really be able to get it out of our own heads. And as you say, it's so funny you said that, because I was just saying to my painting kids last night, when you're making art, it is from your mind and from your heart and your hands, and you're consciously controlling what it is that you're making images of. But your unconscious is very much driving your brush in the case of painting or any kind of art making, even if it's digital. The idea of play, I always think your instinct is smart, just works faster than your consciousness can ascertain. You're able to, get it out of your system in such a manner that isn't narcissistic. It really is about giving gifts to the world of what it is that you're imagining and making that really do hopefully make the world a better place, or at least proves that we aren't robots and passive consumers and submissive to a dominant culture, but rather finding our own stripe and finding our own voice and making stuff because you believe in it, which could be so remarkable just to have personal epiphanies from that.
Yeah. And so now you're teaching at USC. You said you've been there for about 8 years at Roski. And we're at the Spotify studios in downtown LA, and you're literally next door.
Right next door.
So you're teaching a painting class there?
So I teach a myriad of classes. I love teaching advanced painting. I'm teaching advanced comics. As I mentioned, I wrote, I'm sort of the driving force, I could say, but behind the visual narrative art program. I started it when I was chair. It was really during the Kavanaugh hearings. I was like, oh my gosh, hopefully as artists, we're making the world a better place, definitely when you're teaching. But with how so many kids going out into the world that I've had from School of Visual Arts from 25 years who are doing great, I realized that a lot of my students were animation and gaming from the School of Cinematic Arts, the George Lucas funded School of Cinematic Arts. And the Lucas Museum was building across the street, still to open. But I was like, oh my gosh, we're right in between. It makes so much sense to do narrative art. So it was with some struggle to convince, some of the old folks that comics were art, but I was able to establish that program. Now we have 9 classes in place. Edgar Arsenault is wonderfully the chair now, working with him in a collaborative way. He's still leading the administration aspects of this. We have over 120 kids studying these narrative art classes, which are amazing. And we have the grad program next door at Mateo. So right next to Spotify is our wonderful grad program. I teach there too. I'm very proud to be the chair of 2 great committees. A guy named Richard French, who's having his opening, oh my goodness, next Thursday. Elias Hernandez, who's going to have a show after that. But I really encourage your listeners to come to Mateo and see these incredible grad students who are having shows in the heart of the downtown LA art scene. I like to think our program's a little gender identity politics with room to breathe. And they're really smart, incredible students making fantastic work from their heart, mind, and hands of all different mediums. So I love teaching all media, but as a 2D guy, painting and drawing and also comic books are what I'm mostly doing, but also loving teaching the grads.
So the program there, how it works with the master students, they have a week each to
I think 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Yeah,
okay.
2 weeks. And they're incredible shows. Kellyanne has her show up right now, which is great. But in the spring, they rotate them. And so we hope to draw a lot of the people from the arts district here. And they do come and at the openings. And I know for LA Freeze, they're going to do an event here too. So open studios are amazing.
Okay, nice. I should find the timetable and then pull it up and share that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. And then, so how do you teach advanced painting?
Well, I'll tell you this. The syllabus is really to make 7 images that are important to you, that are meaningful to you. In the 21st century, year 2025, painting can mean so many different things. And so this isn't a traditional oil painting class. Of course, that's what I love to do, even though I do think of myself as a conceptual artist in many respects. But you could do acrylic painting, you could do digital work. I've had students do VR. I had students do collage, drawing. One thing that I always wanted to do when I was chair, and now Edgar is following suit, is to have a super studio, because there are very few people who just draw and don't paint or don't do installations. I mean, you're a wonderful renderer, but I don't know if you claim the drawing as your medium or if it's conceptual and everything.
I like to say with my work, there's a foundation of drawing, and that foundation can travel to different mediums and industries. Mm-hmm. But I do believe everything, regardless of the medium and the industry, it starts with drawing. That's the foundation. And it, it can turn into a ballet, it can turn into a film, it can turn into product. It can, I think there's many avenues for it.
I totally agree. Oh my gosh. Shantell, it's no wonder that we're friends. I totally agree. And I don't care what the work looks like at the end of the day or what medium or genre it is. And of course, I get a lot of narrative art students, which is like illustration, comics, or it could be, Thomas Hart Benton or Diego Rivera, kind of, mural-like work. But for me, it's about inventing and creating in a safe space work that you really care about, that's meaningful to you. And so it is like a super studio. The kids we have workshop week, and then we have critique week, and everybody has a voice. I want everybody talking about critique. I'm the teacher, and so I chime in at the end, but I tell the students they don't have to believe me or any of these students, but it's a big brain, and you're getting feedback, and to make work that you really care about, that, God forbid your hands would get cut off in the spring, but make the work that you really want to make right now, because it's so important. And I teach that on every level, even if it's like I haven't taught beginning drawing in a long time, but even on that, you have to put people through exercises just to learn stuff. But realizing that, making things like photos is a Western canonical way of thinking, and it doesn't have to look real, in quotes, to be good. We've known that forever. And if you look at different, work from different cultures for centuries, like it's not, from a Western canonical perspective, what Japanese woodblock prints look like, in terms of perspective. And my comics kids too, they create 10 pages of comics of anything they want in any genre that they want. For years at SVA, I taught an anime and manga class called Anime Wonderland, which was sort of gender identity politics, but through the vehicle of anime and manga, which is so progressive, I think, the best of it. And I have kids doing things in all different kinds of styles and all different kinds of genres, also coming from the Jimmy Iovine, Dr. Dre school, where they're making things with software that like Blender that they could turn into video games or animation, but they're able to do like the comic form of it, which would be like a storyboard or a pitch Bible for other industries. Because for me, it's really important that if they... I would love to, I'm not the Dalai Lama, but I don't know what he would think about all these video games are about killing things to achieve higher levels. I get it. You're getting your yayas out. I have nothing against, first-person shooters or whatever. But I think video games could be like paintings that you can move around in and talk to people with. And I've had students go into animation as, from USC, but also making comics and stuff. And I love the hybrid when kids are painting or taking comics classes, and the comics kids are taking painting classes. At SBA, we wanted it to be like the East Village 80s when Kenny Scharf went there and Keith Haring and Basquiat was hanging out in the hallways. And all the cartoonists were painting and all the painters did comics and they were all in bands together. I think it should be like that. It should be fluid.
No, I love that. I love that versatility of it. And then you get to kind of see the happy accidents when you're exploring different mediums and collaborations. And so much comes from that. And, for myself, it's about challenging myself, as someone that draws, how far can you take a drawing? What can you do with a drawing? Can you work with scientists and drawing? Can you work in these other mediums? Can you work with music and drawing? And so last year, most of that year, I made music. And then now from that music, this year, I want to make dance. So, I have the dance. Now I can work with choreographers or I can choreograph myself. And now the drawing becomes music, the music becomes dance, but it's all the same. It's all about line and movement. And so there's that fluidity between the foundation of what you're creating, but it can go anywhere.
Yeah, I love that. One of the reasons I liked USC is it felt a little bit like the Bauhaus. I mean, we don't have architecture that's upstairs. I wish that was more, part of our program, but it was design and fine art put together. And a lot of artists teach design, and the Bauhaus was the same way, where it was artists and, dance.
Architecture, dance,
Black Mountain College too, obviously, Merce Cunningham, and that whole ideology where everybody's together as a cohort and they all go off to their different genres or platforms, but they all can coalesce and work together. And, with the ideology of the Bauhaus, it was really was art for the people. We love museums, and luckily they've become more accessible. And I think it's great, how teaching has changed too, is the internet, where people have access to digital images and archives and galleries in a way that was more elite or rarefied back in the 90s. And also love, of course, Beyonce. I'm so happy that she won Cowboy Carter for her Best Album of the Year, Best Country Album of the Year. But I tell the kids, you have to be Beyonce about it, be in control of your own stuff without being a diva. Nobody likes a diva, but to be respectful, but at the same time, be in control of your work and where it goes out there. But, like Jay-Z and Beyonce, like sing about Basquiat's on the wall and fine art and in creating a taste for it, or Alicia Keys, like a great collector. And that art could be for everybody, no matter what platform or genre it is. And we could be influenced by art for the world. And it's so important right now.
But also not being scared to do things as you. You mentioned Cunningham. He's someone that's like, well, I can pull an artist and a musician and a dancer on stage and it will all work together. Right. Quite similar to, your comic book panels, when you put those together, that juxtaposition.
Right.
His philosophy was they could be separate, but the fact that they exist and coexist in the same space, they're together.
Right. That's right. And that alchemy could really drive things, and people could like come from their own different perspectives and add to something that becomes grander than any one particular person. To me, that's what it's all about. And I honestly, teaching is is like that because you have that collective impact, especially at a liberal arts university. I platonically love my SVA students who are really wired to do comics. But the neat thing about teaching at a school like this is that it's just everybody, and they're taking these ideas and bringing it to whatever it is that they're doing, and creating new ways of thinking visually. Or sonically, or through dance and stuff.
I'd love to come to one of your comic classes.
Oh, you'd be more than welcome.
Okay.
I'd love that.
I love that. And, thinking about kind of the future, you got the show March 2026.
Yeah.
It sounds like a lot of that work's already made.
No.
No?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm a tiny brush painter.
Okay.
I have a lot of work ahead of me.
So you're going to go into hiding? Because I remember early on when we first met, you had your show at Karma and you disappeared and you were in hiding for a while working on some work. And it's going to be quite similar for that. You're going to disappear for a while and work on some paintings.
Well, as I mentioned, if I'm not teaching, I'm painting or doing art world stuff. But living in Riverside, unfortunately, it's a 2-hour commute from the LA brain. I want to participate more in our community. I do. I feel like I'm responsible, but I might have to, render in my studio. But Osamu Tezuka is one of my favorite artists of all time. He's the guy who created Astro Boy. And it's funny, there's a great Japanese documentary about him. And he did over 150,000 pages of comics before he dropped dead and ran an animation studio that created Astro Boy and came with the White Line. How do you do that? But I think he just lived to draw. And in that documentary, he goes to a big animation convention, in Europe. All the animators, Disney knew who he was. Stanley Kubrick won him to Art Direct 2001. But he sort of bows out gracefully from a panel that he's supposed to be on so he could go back to his hotel room and draw. And I have to say, I do love that mind space where my parrot and I are in our room and Andrew's on the other. I always worked at home, so hence my 33-year relationship, but because I do need to sequester away. But, I would have less hair on my head if I didn't have art because I'd be running down the street screaming, especially these days. And so for me, it is a meditation. I love doing it. But that's the mountain I have to climb, Aspen, for a year from now. And wonderfully, Karma keeps me busy with the art fairs. I just finished Freeze LA painting and then have a new deadline for Art Basel Hong Kong in 2 weeks. The 17th, that's due. So I'm constantly wonderfully busy making my work. But, it's why we live. It's great to be busy. I'm so happy to be able to render as much as I do. I don't know what I'd do without it. I do tell the kids drugs are bad, art is good, and art is my meds.
And I love that idea about Aspen. Like metaphorically, you're climbing a mountain. Physically, you'll be climbing a mountain. Spiritually, you'll be climbing that mountain.
Yeah.
And so does Andrew, your husband, is he doing something similar to you? Did he end up in the arts?
He's an artist who's still making stuff and photographing and everything. He isn't like a big public person at all, and he loves being at our home with our pets and stuff. And so his job is sort of keeping me at my easel. And taking care of our little ranchero
your ranch of animals.
Yeah, our ranch of animals. And really that's what's kept us together, I think, is that I'm a brainiac making my work and teaching. And thankfully Andrew's there so I could have my life surrounding me and everything taken care of so I could just concentrate on my work and my teaching.
I love that.
Yeah.
And then, so in general, what do you think the point of art is? And I think we've touched on this and kind of many different aspects. But if you were to kind of generalize for you or for the world and society, what is the point of art?
It's funny, when I was younger, when I was working at the gallery, Mike Kelly had a show at Metro Pictures. And it was one of those first shows with the animals on top and under the blankets. And I was like, wait a minute, this is new. This is something different because it's sort of like Duchamp, but like very warm kind of Duchamp that was really talking about culture with ready-mades and personal backgrounds and so on. And I walked out of there gobsmacked and I wrote this manifesto called the Neo-Integrity Manifesto about art. It's a long list, but it starts off with, I think, art is not about commodity and commodity is not the reason to make art. And it ends with art is about the creation of things that are meaningful to the artist and therefore hopefully the world. And that art was ultimately about, making things both from your brain, but also your spirit. For me, art making is really about keeping the pilot light on, the spirit that is our soul alive. and making works that extend beyond you, that sometimes we're channeling, I think, and making work that exists in the world to ignite other people's spirits and keep those alive and to keep hope alive. I mean, goodness knows. I've done paintings of Harvey Milk. One is that's at SF MoMA, I'm so proud to say. But, Harvey Milk was all about keeping hope alive. And he says, if we don't have hope, we don't have anything. But that he could be elected, or people like him or other people who are not phallocentric patriarchal order being able to participate and making the world a better place, I think, is so edifying for the creators, but also edifying for everybody. I mean, I think art's like a giant parade, right? And the artists are like the floats, but then you have the people guiding the floats, the people cheering the floats along, the people who are organizing the parade. And I think we need that so much, especially right now.
I love to see and share your manifesto.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, I think everyone should write their own manifesto. I wrote one a few years ago.
Oh my goodness, I'd love to read it.
And I think it's just a nice guiding star about what you think about art and kind of how it should lead the future and kind of also the present. So that's really interesting.
That's right. I've curated shows called the Neo Integrity shows. My senior liberal arts in art class at NYU was called Neo Integrity: Art in the Age of Technocratic Commodity Culture.
Yeah.
But I really, even though I don't use that phrase neo-integrity so much anymore, it really is my ideology and really the driving force of why I make work and why I teach. I love that you wrote your manifesto. I truly would love to read it. And I do think it helps to ground us to, like drawing helps to ground your thoughts by objectifying them. Writing does that too. And when you could have an ideology that you follow in your life, it really is a good guiding principle.
Yeah. And so hope and activism are a huge part of your work.
Yeah.
And it feels like there is this thread of cynicism that goes through it as well.
Well, it's funny. I don't think of myself as a cynical, ironic person. Being a gay person, it's funny because I do a lot of paintings of like Kermit the Frog and the Muppets, but it's not a joke. Like Jim Henson was really like, as a kid growing up, I was the perfect age for Sesame Street, which was really built on, the civil rights movement very consciously, about people of all different stripes and colors and flannel and fuzz being together in a community that looks a little bit like Harlem, right? An urban environment. And it was all about collaboration and empathy and compassion, more than just the 3 R's. And then the Muppet Show was about mayhem and things blowing up, but it was also about like different kind of ideas of gender coding. I mean, obviously the Muppets didn't have genitalia, but and also spirituality in a weird way. Like he was a Christian Scientist family when he was young in Mississippi, and he wasn't religious in that regard, but he really believed in higher truths and greater collective beings of interrelatability that permeated all the work that he did, which was for the world. I mean, it was commercial. The Muppet Show was one of the biggest shows of its era, but it was also coming with an idea of despite the humor and the irony and the slapstick, from a place of real integrity, of hope and empathy and compassion. And so, yeah, I get angry, of course, but rather than pulling my hair out and doing, even in this book, there are things that had to trickle out during the last era because I just had to get it out of my system. I'm trying to do works that make me and my meditation feel good, spiritually and politically and morally, that I hope that, when it's on a wall somewhere, inspires that same kind of feeling, and as a collective, inspires that same kind of feeling. And it's why I live and breathe.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, I feel like I should make Aspen 2026 my first time going there, because
oh my gosh,
I've never
I would love
been.
to have you there. Oh my gosh.
So I'm going to put that on the calendar.
Thank you.
But it's been so nice having you in today. And
Shantell, it's really a privilege and an honor.
I feel like I'm wiser now. I know a lot more.
No, I don't know about that. Oh my gosh. Like if you like, you should be like teaching these classes too. And I think you're teaching through your work and obviously through podcasts and things that are part of your practice too, extending work to the world. And that's such an important thing right now, that people realize that art isn't just, in quotes, about rich white people, in this rarefied elite existence of an ivory tower, that really is for the world. And despite the fact that sometimes it's in venues that are hard for some people to access, that they know that galleries are free and open to the public.
Yeah.
Openings are free and open to the public. You could look at Seesaw apps and find out cool shows and see things online and stuff for fine art. And then obviously comics are great. And it's like it's a women-led, people of color, LGBTQIA+ led community of creators since the early aughts. And that really is art for the people, and illustration. And it's all good. And so I hope your listeners just make stuff because it makes them feel good, and also helps them think about stuff in a great way. That's a meditation that's edifying for them, but that also they participate. That obviously listening to something like this, they're participating, but they don't feel like this isn't for them, that they could jump into and see stuff and go to museums, which are, especially like the Broad on a Friday or even the Whitney on a Friday, they're free evenings. And so it's a cheap date to go to a museum. And even though we love movies, it's fun to be able to talk to your friend or friends and go out to openings as a cohort and have a really good time and enjoy the work and participate in the community. It's interesting, just even since the fires and even since the last election, people have been coming to openings and really feeling the warmth of family, of their art family, and the gratitude of being able to experience art. And there's something and even online or like listening to podcasts like this to know that there is a voice of freedom.
Yeah.
Which art is really also about. It's about liberation and freedom.
And I think what's also important for me is the artist's voice, and capturing that, because, we capture the work within itself, that is preserved, it's collected, it's out there in the world. But, kind of where you are now, Keith, as you, in a way, we're kind of immortalizing you right now in this podcast. And I think there's something special about that. And kind of also just, as you mentioned, like the spectrum of artists, there isn't one way of doing it. Everyone I spoke to has had a different path, done it a different way. Right. It's looked very different. And I think it can be different for all of us. And the more we integrate art into society, into families, into communities, into our own practice, the better we're going to be, because we have that tool to deal with all these things that are going on.
That's right. As artists, as practicing artists, but also for the consumer, not that they're buying things, but just consuming work. It's the feng shui of your world, like the physical feng shui, but also it could be the feng shui of your psychological world. And it's great. We need. I tell the kids, like, even if they're doing robot fighting comics, like, if you could do it in a way that you can't guess the ending, that when it's about something and communication, it could be really fun and remind people of their own consciousness. I think, when art can invoke the idea of the sublime, where you're looking at something, but you're feeling it too, and you start thinking about your thoughts and objectifying your thoughts and who you are as a person, it's like a little like Buddhist kind of idea where you realize like, oh, I'm one person in the world of many, and we need to take care of each other, and we need to take care of the flora, the fauna of our planet to be able to coexist in space. In environments that are productive and conducive for living. Yeah. And I think art can really keep that spirit alive and spark that consciousness where it brings us out of our curled up fetal selves in our bedrooms when sometimes we don't feel like getting out of bed. It can make you feel like hopeful and that what you're doing is important, and what you're seeing and just your own ideas, your own agency is important.
So keep making, sharing, seeing,
Absolutely.
All of the above.
Absismurfully, I should say.
Well, thank you so much, Keith. What a pleasure.
Shantell, thank you. It's my great honor to be here. I'm so grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of What's the Point? Recorded at Spotify Studios in Los Angeles. Check out our website, made by Eat.studio. Grant Alexander Peters does our theme music, engineering, and editing. Research and pre-show preparation are done by Vern Molidor and Joyce Adams-So from the Shantell Martin studio team. If you like this episode, please consider subscribing to the podcast and leaving a nice 5-star review. Don't forget to check out the show description for more information on today's guest. And you can follow myself and the podcast on Instagram at Shantell_Martin. What's the point? Unstuck. Undiluted. undisclosed, uninterrupted, unclear, understood, unadulterated, underrated, unrealistic, unknowing, unbeing, unseeing, ungoing, unknowing, unintentional, unintersensual, unintellectual, unintersectional, underlectual, underwexual, undersectional, underbeing more, unstuck, instuck, we stuck, you stuck, this stuck, that stuck, net 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 loss. Unstuck, undiluted, undiscussed, interrupted, unmistakable, unclear, unravel, understood, unadulterated, unknowing, unseeing, ungoing, unbeing, undoing, I'm me, I'm you, we are the sum of it all, the son of it all, the sum of it all, the son of it all, the sum of it all, the son of it all, the son of it all, the son of it all, the sum of it all, the son of it all, the sum of it all, the son of it all, the sum of it all, the son of it all, the sum of it all, the son of it all, the sum of it all, the son of it all, the sum of it all. Unknowing, ungoing, unflowing, unseeing, unbeing, unknowing, undoing, undeing, undoing, uneeing, unbeing, unseeing, ungoing, unflowing, unseeing, unknow. I know that the sum of you adds up to more than me. I know that the sum of you adds up to more than me. I know that the sum of you adds up to more than me. I know that the sum of you adds up to more than me. I know that when we walk, I know that when we talk, I know that when we read, I know that when we read, I know that when we do, I know that when we see, I'm none of it all, the sum 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 of it all, the sum